After 4 years of development, I'm finally done with my indie game Grapples Galore. It's an online multiplayer arena shooter focused on physics-based grappling hook movement and active ragdolls. I barely knew anything about making games before making Grapples Galore, and because of that, its development has been a long and difficult journey. In this video, I want to share that journey with you guys. 4 years ago, I was playing an Attack on Titan fan game with some friends, and I got inspired to make my own grappling hook game. I liked designing robots at the time, so I made this player model and a bunch of sci-fi art assets. With the help of one of Danny's tutorials, I quickly got some basic grappling hook movement working, and for whatever reason, I decided to make the robot an active ragdoll. Unfortunately, after this point, I struggled to expand the game much because I was very new to programming at the time. This eventually led to me shelving this project. A few months later though, I decided to make something very similar. I created a brand new project and made an active ragdoll owl. I wanted to make a game about a bunch of birds that couldn't fly and instead used grappling hooks to get around. I quickly learned the hard way about the importance of backing up your work though, because my project file got corrupted and I lost all of my work on this project. This sucked, but I didn't give up. I created a new project with version control this time, so I could constantly back up my work. Throughout all of this, I had tried many times to set up multiplayer and failed. I finally took the time to properly learn how it works though. Multiplayer game development is really hard. Most game developers will recommend to avoid making your first game multiplayer because of this, but honestly I learned so much about programming because I did. Especially because I made a physics-based game, which adds a whole other layer of complexity to multiplayer code. Over the course of the next few months, I started working on a brand new multiplayer demo. I got rid of the owl in favor of more traditional active ragdoll character designs. I looked at games like Gang Beasts, Human Fall Flat, and Totally Accurate Battle Simulator for reference, and ended up designing these 3 characters. I gave each character 2 hooks, so players can feel like Spider-Man when swinging around. Pretty quickly, I realized how much work it would be to create multiple playable characters though, so I scrapped 2 of them. Around this time, I also decided on a name for my game. Grapples Galore. My first choice, Guns and Grapples, was already taken. I definitely started to see real potential in the active ragdoll grappling hook combination in this version of the game. Having a grappling hook that pulls on an active ragdoll allows for really fluid and dynamic movement. At this point, a proper level was the biggest thing my game was lacking. I didn't know anything about level design, so making one was pretty challenging for me. Through trial and failure though, I learned that verticality makes grappling fun, and lots of cover makes gunfights interesting. With this in mind, I made this level. The art took me ages to make, but I was really happy with this look. Next, I added a few guns and put them in these mystery crates. At the time, I was feeling pretty good about this version of Grapples Galore, so I posted a video of it to Reddit to show it off. To my surprise, someone sent it to the people at Landfall Games. Apparently they thought it looked cool, so I got in contact with them and even pitched the game to them. The pitch ended up not working out unfortunately, but this was still a great learning experience. Landfall has been a huge inspiration for me, so I was ecstatic even getting that opportunity. After pitching the game though, I sort of reevaluated a lot of things about Grapples Galore and made some major changes. I focused a lot on improving the controls and movement. That was Landfall's biggest piece of feedback. Since the game fully revolves around grappling hook movement, the controls need to be really tight. I also made the big decision to scrap the old map and create a new art style focused on gameplay first. This art style is very low poly because movement felt better on simpler geometry. I don't think this art style looks better, but it feels better, which is way more important. I also actually kept in mind scale this time because on the old gas station map there were some crazy issues with scale. The first 4 maps I made with this art style were the suburb, the city, the train, and the factory. The train map even used to move in this version of the game. I then removed the weapon crates in favor of weapon pickups. I even added health pickups as well. This ended up adding a lot more strategy to the game. Next, I switched the way I handle multiplayer. This in particular was a huge task and took ages to complete. I wanted Grapples Galore to be free to play, and the old way I handled the multiplayer could potentially cost me a lot in server fees. I didn't want to take any financial risks, so I switched to a Steam-based solution. If you're making a multiplayer game for Steam, Steam offers matchmaking and servers for no additional cost. I hear a lot of developers complain about Steam taking a 30% cut of your revenue, but honestly, for the services they provide, I think it's warranted. After all these changes and more, I had a small but complete experience, so I decided to launch my game into early access and see what people think. When I first launched my game into early access, I only had 800 wishlists and I didn't know what to expect. It did much better than I could have ever imagined though. I remember thinking when I looked at the player count that it had to be some sort of bug. Turns out that it wasn't though, and my game had been shared on a massive Russian Telegram group chat for free games, and a bunch of people had started playing it. I made a video on this, and it ended up being my first big video. I even got a comment from Danny on it, which was a cool full circle moment because he was a big inspiration for me. A bunch of big YouTubers and streamers played the game around this time too, like H2O Delirious. The game's numbers then slowed down a little bit after this, but the player base was still pretty big. It's surreal to know that 1 to 300 people are pretty much always playing my game. I realized pretty quickly that this popularity didn't really equate to a lot of money. Most of the biggest and most profitable games are free to play, so you'd assume that having over 1 million downloads on your free to play game would equate to a lot of revenue, but really it didn't. Most free to play games make a lot of money because of something called whaling. It's more profitable for them to be free to play because even if a bunch of people who play pay nothing, they get a few whales that spend thousands of dollars on their game's microtransactions. A lot of big game studios even hire psychologists to make spending absurd amounts of money addictive. Things like the Steam Marketplace are particularly interesting to me because a lot of games that use it have loot crates that give you items worth real money. This makes it even more like gambling, but interestingly, a lot of players prefer it to other loot crates in games because even if you don't get an item you want, at least you can sell it for a little bit of money. I've looked at alternative monetization options like loot crates to see if there are any ethical ways of doing them, but I wouldn't feel good about putting something like that in my game, so even after seeing how unprofitable it is, I stuck with a DLC-based monetization model. After releasing the game into early access, I spent the next 8 months rolling out a bunch of updates. I added workshop support, new game modes, new languages, new weapons, and new maps. I even held a couple map making competitions with the workshop support. I remember people being pretty upset when I first added workshop support because to make it work, I had to remove the train's movement. Development was definitely harder during early access because you have to make sure the game is functional at every stage of development. Constantly releasing updates and keeping my community engaged is pretty exhausting and a little stressful. Because of this, I took a break from Grapples Galore development for a few months to participate in one of Blackthorn Prod's game development competitions. I managed to win this competition and released the game I made for it, Gunfrog, onto Steam shortly after. Gunfrog ended up making a lot more money than Grapples Galore ever has, and took a fraction of the time to make. To be honest, I also had a lot more fun making a small, simple game like Gunfrog. This was definitely eye-opening. I decided I finally needed to wrap up Grapples Galore's early access and release the game. This wasn't going to be a rushed release though. For the past 4 months, I've been working hard on a massive Grapples Galore update. This update is likely going to be the last big content update I ever release for the game, so I need it to be a perfect send-off. I've added a new map, improved movement, updated every old map, added lots of new cosmetics, and much more. I even finally listened to the community and added a racing mode and a sniper. I won't go through everything I've added and changed though, because I've packed this update with a lot of small details that I want people to discover for themselves. After 4 years, I'm finally done with my game. Grapples Galore has taken way longer than it needed to, and has had a really lackluster development process. I've scrapped so much work and random features. After 4 years of development, it also has barely made me any money. Despite this though, I regret nothing. Grapples Galore has taught me everything I know about game development and honestly changed my life. It has meant so much to me, and knowing how many people care about it is really endearing. Thank you so much to everyone who's played it. If you haven't played it already, please consider checking it out. It was really fun making this video and sort of rediscovering my creative process and a bunch of random features and ideas that got lost during Grapples Galore's chaotic iterative development. Thanks for watching.